and think about the guys that are still there or wherever they are. I know I lost my co-pilot and saw a plane land in up the Sepik River, and the whole crew get out and walk away, and that was the last we ever heard of him. And I'm sure I never got anything but a couple of bullet holes in my plane, but there. So let's take a minute and say to the world that about all those guys that are still there.
I'm sure we've all had our tragedies and our difficult moments, but someone mentioned the word snafu, and it reminded me of my very first mission in China. And I was ordered to go down, I think we're on the Salween River, it may have been the Mekong River, you may remember those rivers. And I was ordered to go down and find a DZ, or a drop zone, to drop a whole load of ammunition, food and medical supplies to the Chinese. I found the place, and there were the flags out on the ground, and I wagged my wings, and they waved to me, and my crew dumped everything out. It took about 3 or 4 passes, and they're waving, they're picking everything up, and I waggled my wings, and one more pass, and I headed back home. Got a radio message from home base. Don't drop that load, don't drop that load. So I said, would you mind telling me why? They said, we just got word that the Japanese took that over about an hour ago. And I said, I trained 2 years for this? That was my first mission.
Okay.
Yeah, on December 16th was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. We took off on a mission, and the weather was very, very bad. In fact, we couldn't even see the end of the runway. But in those days, they didn't have radar. You just took off, so there's such a rate of climb and such a time, and then you turn. And when you come out of the top, there's about 1,000 planes flying in circles. And then you start shooting flares. Each group had their own flare. So anyway, we were recalled and couldn't find the field. And we ended up in the northern part of England. And being we had the bombs and the gas and everything, we couldn't drop the bombs not knowing where they would land, even though they would be unsafe. So we did crash into the top of this mountain up in northern England and killed a bombardier and the...
That's yes.
Yeah, and a navigator. So anyway, we came down. We got separated because it was snowing. Part of the crew went down one side, and me and the pilot, who was all smashed up, his face, and I was a little banged up. And when we got to the bottom of the hill, the English were there, an Englishman and his wife, and they thought we were Germans. We had this green uniform on and the parachute harness. So after we convinced them that we were all right, you know who we were, then they took us to an RAF hospital. So then after about a month, and we went to a rest camp, and then we went back on flight. We had a choice, but being stupid kids, we went back to flying.
What was your plane?
B-17.
B-17.
Yeah. In 1968, they found some Boy Scouts, or equivalent of Boy Scouts, found a wreck up on the hill. Oh, yeah. And we had a big reunion in New York, and we had Colonel Kabrisky, yeah, he was there, and General Spatz and General Acre, and we had I have some pictures here, and we had a reunion.
Get them out, and we can look at them. The camera can find them. So anybody who has any pictures, just hold it up like this, and hold it up like that, so the camera can sort of, keep it, about like that. Anybody who has any pictures, if you just show them like that, one of the cameras can pick that up.
Picture of the boys, they found the wreck, right. And then they put up a little plaque. And I just wanted to show you.
Right.
There he is. Oh.
Do you and your crew get together from?
All that's left that I know is the radio operator, and he lives in South Carolina.
Oh yeah. Right. Right. Okay, that's a great story. Yeah.
Okay, no story here, but this gentleman reminded me to say that what kind of kids we were when we were doing this. I had most of my missions done before I turned 20.
Is that right?
Affirmative. And these guys are all young, even though we look like old fossils at this time.
Yeah, that's so. When were you first flying? What year?
Well, I started flying in '42, right out of high school. I enlisted, and I started. Well, I was assigned to a B-17 as a co-pilot, as I said earlier, and then got checked out sometime and about halfway through the missions. But we stayed together as a team. One mission I was the captain, and the other mission I had a great first pilot.
What was your plane?
A B-17.
B-17. Yeah. How many B-17 guys are here? 1, 2. Well, look at them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And B-25s? Hey. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 4.5. P-38. You're the only P-38 guy here, I'll bet you.
But on the B-25, I ended up flying a B-25, becoming a first pilot after 4 hours. We got a Fat Cat B-25 airplane in, and I had to fly down from Okinawa to Manila to pick up some parachutes and liquor and all of that stuff, so I checked out. And after 4 hours, I became a first pilot on a B-25.
What happened to the other guy? Perry, you got something? I hear something coming out. Ed?
On a lighter note, Phil Green, who's over there, and a fellow named Johnny Greer and I were all at school upstate New York, Colgate University at the same time. Phil said he was flying B-29s off Tinian. I went into Saipan in a PB-2 wide that was rigged with 40 litters to take out a bunch of wounded. The beachhead, the Marines, 2nd Marine Division hit there, and it was 2 days after they landed. So as we're up the wounded, the guy who was in charge of the beach came out. He said, "Don't leave the airplane." He said, "The Japs are swimming out and throwing hand grenades into the seaplanes." I would want to find a fellow named Johnny Greer, who I went to school with. Oh, he says, "He's right in there in a foxhole." He says, "I'll run you in." So I grabbed a bottle that we carried just in case we had any snake bite. And he went in and dove in this foxhole. I said, "Hi, John. How are you?" He turned around. He says, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I brought you this." Well, they had overrun a Jap position where they found some crab meat that had been packed in the U.S. So he said, "I'm going to crack the crab meat, you crack the scotch." I said, "I got to make a takeoff here pretty soon." But we did a ceremonial touch, and John, I saw at reunions thereafter, obviously they took Saipan, and he was just a great guy, looked just like he did when he was playing football.
I'll be right back. Johnny Greer, where are you? This.
We're switching.
Okay.
It's on. This isn't on. Yeah, it is. Me neither.
Okay. What are you doing? Get it going, and then Johnny Greer, where are you? Where? Phil Green? Where? I want a Johnny Greer. Where is here? Phil Green, you're going to talk about Johnny Greer? I don't know. What? He doesn't know what Perry's talking about. Okay, so we'll come back to that.
He wasn't privy to that situation at Saipan. He wasn't privy to that situation at Saipan. He was just flying off Tinian, which is so close you could see one from the other on a clear day. Well, Johnny is not with us anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Wait a minute. We have somebody.
It asked me to read this, and I think it's very apropos. It says, "Don't blame the elderly for the failings of society. We are probably the only members of society in the history of mankind for which the younger generation has so little respect and has demonstrated such a shameful lack of regard. Senior citizens are constantly being criticized, belittled, and sniped at for every conceivable deficiency of the modern world, real and imaginary. Upon reflection, I would like to point out that it wasn't the senior citizens who took the melody out of music, or the beauty out of art, or the pride out of appearance, or the romance out of love, the commitment out of marriage, the responsibility out of parenthood, togetherness out of family, learning out of education, loyalty out of Americanism, service out of patriotism, the hearth out of the home, civility out of behavior, refinement out of language, dedication out of employment, prudence out of spending, or ambition out of achievement. And we certainly are not the ones who eliminated patience and tolerance from relationships. I think it's a very
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Arthur. We have a new guest here. Bill?
Yeah, Bill Jenkins.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And are you a WASP? Oh, wife. Was she? Okay. Okay, we've got... take the mic and...
Yeah. Well, Mr. Isaacson over there, he was in the same outfit that I was, 2nd Bomb Division. I was in 8th Air Force, and I was in Norwich, England. I spent 2 years over there with the 8th Air Force, the 2nd Bomb Division. And I don't know what else I can say. Well, I was in communications. There are a lot of guys that don't like me because I was the guy that sent them on their missions. I was the guy that took the field order coming down from 8th Air Force headquarters, which was Pine Tree. And then I would take that and cut a tape on it and send it out to all the bomb groups who would be flying the mission the next day, wherever, Germany or France or whatever. And so that was my mission, to send these guys on their missions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we got somebody else back here. Jim, you want to tell us about you? Jim has just come in, so...
Actually, I'm not a veteran at all. I was never in service. However, my brother was a pilot on the B-24 out of Atterbury on the 466th Bomb Group. I don't know if there's anyone here for the 466th, but if there is, I'd like to talk with him. Part of the story is that a book was written about the crew that went down on April 21st. It was one of the last bombing raids on Germany. It was the last plane to be shot down, American bomber shot down in Germany. We received the news of the missing in action on VE Day, which was very mixed emotions at home. In any case, I missed service because I was classified 5A as a sole surviving son, but it's a sad price to pay.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome to our circle here. Okay, Fred Beyer is here. Why don't you? I'll hold the pictures up and you talk.
I feel we need a little equal time here for the B-24 guys. I haven't heard much from them. The 8th Air Force and the B-17s always did have better PR than we did. But this is a B-24. They built more B-24s than any other heavy bomber during and after World War II. Most of them were in Italy, but we also had a wing or two in England.
And the Pacific, we had some.
I'd like to tell you a little story about the beginning and the end of my 18 missions. And people always ask me, was I scared? What
If you weren't, you were crazy.
What were your feelings? And I said, well, I do remember being scared, really scared, on my first mission. It was the policy in the 15th Air Force. I don't know if they did this at other places, but when you came in as a replacement crew, the pilot and all other crew members were assigned to go with another crew on a mission before you went out with your own crew. So I was flying co-pilot for another crew, and we were going down the bomb run at one of our worst targets at that time, which was the marshalling yards in Vienna. And I had nothing to do. I had nothing to do but look out the window, and I saw these flak bursts, and I just figured, this is the end. I'm never going to live through this. And that's the only time that I ever flew without having some... After that, I was pilot, airplane commander, and a lot of experiences, a lot of problems, but I was never really as scared as that first one. The last one is one I got to tell you about, because there was a good-for-nothing target up in the Brenner Pass. And it was a railway bridge, and we don't bomb railway bridges as a strategic target. We bomb big things like railway yards, oil refineries, factories, and so forth. But they had the Germans were pouring out of Italy by the whatever, and they were taking all the heavy equipment they could find. The only way to get it back into Germany was to go over a bridge or through the Brenner Pass. So they had a little side path that went over a bridge up there called Vipitino Railway Bridge. They sent in the fighters, the fighter bombers. Couldn't get to it because the mountains were so high all around. They had the whole thing ringed with guns, and they were shooting down on these guys trying to get the bridge. B-25s were called in from Corsica, the 12th Air Force. This should interest you. They couldn't get there. They lost a lot of planes, but they couldn't get it. So, okay, finally, they'll say, well, high-altitude bombing, we'll send in the B-24s. So the 376th and a lot of other groups down that way were sent in to do the job. We got there, and of course, somebody in G2 forgot to figure out that if the mountains were 12,000 feet high and we're at 25,000, that cut it in half, so they're shooting everything they got, including throwing rocks at us. We lost a lot of airplanes. But that was my last mission, and that's the one where they got me. They blew us they blew us out of the formation. We lost most of our systems like hydraulics and even our oxygen, including all of the flight controls, and we were spiraling towards the ground. I flipped on a thing that most guys didn't even remember what it was because we never used them, and that was an autopilot. And the autopilot has gyros in it, and most of the time they didn't even turn them on. I had always turned mine on, and it was a flip of the finger. And while we were preparing to bail out, the plane was wallowing and wallowing and wallowing, and finally it started to right itself. I canceled the order to bail out. We headed for Switzerland. We'll bail out there. Pretty soon we're flying pretty good on the autopilot. So I kind of got it turned around and had a new kind of an autopilot. The old type were Sperry, made by Sperry gyroscope. And once you engaged it, you could not change it. And if you were wrong, then you were going to climb, you were going to die, whatever. The new one, which just came out, was the Minneapolis Honeywell C1, and you could turn controls, knobs, and it would send a signal to a little actuator in the wing, and then you could actually fly the airplane. So I flew it back, and we looked for a long stretch of beach just north of the spur in Italy, and I got her on the ground. They gave me the DFC for that.
Well, you deserve it.
Let's hear some more about these B-24 guys from Italy.
Any more B-24 guys around want to talk? Here we've got...
I don't know if you consider it a plus now. We flew both B-24s and B-17s, but the B-24 was the fastest burning airplane the Air Force had.
The B-25 and the B-26 were the noisiest planes, right? Right, John?
They were noisy. They used to say one a day in Tampa Bay. When we went for operational training, that WAGs used to say one a day in Tampa Bay. But here's a sort of story. Everybody here remembers the first combat mission they went on, and it's not a particularly pleasant memory. Well, the first one I went on, I didn't go on with my own crew because I'd gotten sick in Ireland, and they had a regulation that you had to go with another crew. And this guy, the pilot of the crew, had the wind up, and there was a 3-hour delay, and at the end of 3 hours, he had me so scared that I didn't know what to do, and we set off, and nobody had ever told me about window, you know, the chaff that was thrown out in front of you to confuse the flak predictors. And so this window was coming back, and when we got back from the mission, I said, boy, that flak was really heavy today.
Did you know Jack Vitor?
No.
He was a B-26 pilot also.
The thing about B-26s is that they were such a terrible airplane that the pilots that flew them were awful good. And that one a day in Tampa Bay is no joke. That's the ones that got through there really were good.
Okay. Thank you, John Cherry. We're with Hardy and Isaacson.
Well, here I am.
Wait a minute. Let me give you your picture back. Here, I can hold the pictures.
after I washed out as an aviation cadet, I ended up in the Armament and Gunnery School and was assigned to the 492nd Bomb Group up in North Pickenham, where Ed Monteforte was a bombardier. The one mission I want to mention, the roughest mission I've had with between the 492nd and the 467th was over Kiel, Germany. And I did keep a record of all of my missions, the targets and all of that sort of thing. This was 1944, 6 hours, 55 minutes, a gasworks, heavy accurate flak, no fighters, 35 flak holes in the ship, fire on the flight deck, hydraulic system out, over target, ruined all 4 engines, prepared to ditch in the North Sea, made it back to base, only ship hit hard, period. This is Black Albert Shower, who Mr. Spence knew. This was the 467th Bomb Group. We had...
Who was Black Albert Shower?
He was the CO, a West Point graduate, and we flew 100 operational bombing missions in 40 days. Incidentally, I had a younger brother, Bill, who was 21 years of age and was a tail gunner on a B-17 and was shot down and killed over Kassel, Germany. Thank you.
I have a story to tell you about tail gunners. Be with you in a minute. The tail gunner, the B-29 pilot who flew over Japan, and their oxygen was shot out, and the tail gunner passed out because the oxygen was out, and he so the plane lands, finally gets back to base and lands, and he wakes up in the blister of the B-29 tail gunner, tail position, and he wakes up and it's dead silence. He doesn't hear anything. He says, "Oh my God, what's happened? They've all bailed out, and what'll I do?" So he pulls open the. I've never been in this blister, so I don't know. He pulls the window release and jumps out and breaks his leg on the concrete. So, wait a minute, we've got Bob back here. Oh.
So that I could get admitted here.
Oh yeah. So we believe you. We believe you.
I'm the only Marine who currently is here.
A Marine.
I'm proud to be with this group, which probably has done as much as any concentrated group of people to save democracy, what we did. And I'd like to do 2 things, tell a couple of quick stories and then make some observations about the senior citizen comments. First, as a ground officer, we had a lot of responsibility to keep the planes flying and to do everything to help the people who flew. And yet we had our opportunities and requirements to fly so that we knew what was going on. And I guess the most frightening thing that happened to me in even taking controls of a transport wasn't rough as getting in the bubble of a bomber and then looking around and saying, "My God, I'm not in the airplane." I'm sticking out at the end. One of our pilots was Ty Power, the actor. And at the end, when we were being solicited to stay in the Marine Corps, he said, "Well, if I could get the same treatment, that is $500,000 for one job and pick my own leading ladies, I'd stay in." I was offered to go with our commanding general as his aide to China, and I said too that I'm a civilian and I want to go back. One of the things that I did at the end of my tour was to go to Nagasaki, where the Marines did the burial, and the Marine officer who was in charge then took me about the whole area. I was there, fortunately, for less than a half a day, and I saw where the bulldozers that he had pushed the bodies into graves. And standing in the middle, looking up from to the sky from where the bomb was exploded, you could see exactly where it was, because anything that remained on the right side, and there was very little that did, leaned to the right, and anything to the left leaned that way. And it was, I guess, not just my background toward peace that when I left, but going through some of this that warranted my looking at the fact that while we here have done such a great job, that it's not the military that saves the world, it's the negotiations and the lack of force that we need. And I wondered how many people here who had served and who had the best equipment available and the best facilities feel now that it's not that kind of fighting that makes a better world, and that the senior citizens who have left the world or leaving it to the younger people haven't left such a great world at this point.
Thank you, Robert Schwartz. Charlie?
I mentioned earlier I went down on mission number 6, but that was not due to enemy fire. The aircraft must have been overtaxed on a prior mission, because trying to keep up with the squadron, we lost one engine, and then we lost a second one. We figured we better turn around and head back for Italy, and in doing so, we lost number 3. And we still had the mountains to go over, and we still had the Adriatic to cross before we could get to Italy. So we had the crew bail out. Pilot, I was flying co-pilot because I was new over there, but we got out and landed in the mountains. But one thing I remember about the bailing out, we had no prior instruction. I knew the chest pack was uppermost, pulled the ripcord and nothing happened, I thought. But then the pilot chute came out, and then the chute came out, and I remember how still everything was, peaceful and quiet until we got close to the ground, and then we were approaching very rapidly. So I landed in a tree. They told you could direct your direction by spilling the air out of the chute. Well, I tried that, and I thought I was going to spill everything out, so I just left it to the Lord to get me down that way. So these rough-looking people came running to us, and I found out, I thought this was it, but they took us and gave us food and so forth and so on. And then they told us that they were going to spirit us out of that area. The Germans knew we had landed there. They had picked up the rest of the crew. They knew we were there. They said they were going to take us down to Serbia, which they did. We traveled it by night, and it took us, we finally got into Serbia. We were in Yugoslavia about